It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
It's exactly 2100 Central African time. Good evening and welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. We're of course coming to you live from Johannesburg, South Africa. You can also catch us live on SABC Plus app. On DSTV Audio Bouquet, we're on channel 802 and on OpenView channel 628. My name is Innocent Semosa. Of course, I'm in for Tsepiso Makwetla. You can also follow us on social media for updates, highlights and exclusive interviews and content. On X, we're at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook, we're at Channel Africa. And of course, on Instagram at Channel Africa 1, TikTok at Channel Africa 1, YouTube at Channel Africa 1. You can also send us voice notes on +27 714 4459, or alternatively you can send us an email at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
All right, let's look at Africa World Hour top stories this evening. Now, all eyes are on Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé, as President Paul Biya prepares to be inaugurated today for an 8-year term, extending his 43-year rule. The ceremony comes amid ongoing political tensions, with opposition parties rejecting the results of the October 12th election and calling for nationwide protests and lockdowns. Political analyst Paul Achang.
What we're seeing really is in pockets of resistance where the opposition has electoral circumscriptions and controls of those electoral circumscriptions. We've seen more the government try to get into consultations and talks with a lot of the transporters and a lot of the populations. Day-to-day, those who do the regular day-to-day jobs, I would say in the markets, the buyers, the sellers in the markets, those who do the transportations, especially from the north, the corridors of the north. We've seen the government enter into negotiation and consultation talks with them where they can provide them security in terms of the transportation of their trucks from corridors, especially if they go towards Chad and Republic. So therefore, we're seeing a gradual return to normalcy. So we don't anticipate, in terms of the proceedings and the oath-taking ceremony today, a major change.
Now, South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, says all citizens deserve quality health care regardless of their socio-economic status. Motsoaledi was speaking at the G20 Health Minister meeting in Polokwane, Limpopo province. Motsoaledi says that they will collaborate with countries such as Norway, which already has universal health care, to ensure that the National Health Insurance, NHI, benefits all citizens.
We need robust regulatory guardrails, learning from global examples to ensure public financing remains central. Health cannot just be a question of who has got more money. It's a fundamental human right. We must defend it from forces that prioritize financial returns and profits over human dignity and survival.
And now, a 40-year-old man from the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands in South Africa is being treated for mpox in the Northdale Hospital in Pietermaritzburg. The Provincial Health Department says the patient visited a clinic in the city with symptoms associated with mpox mid-October. A laboratory test confirmed he had mpox. Now, the department's Director of Environmental Health and Communicable Disease Control, Babongile Mhlongo, says the case is still managed in hospital this year. South Africa had 12 mpox cases, on which 8 are in Gauteng and 2 in KwaZulu-Natal provinces, respectively. Mhlongo says people should visit their nearest health facility if they have symptoms like fever, headache, muscle pain, or a rash.
The important thing is to visit the nearest facility, and so where you can get a correct diagnosis and you can be able, where you then fit in the criteria of getting vaccines, you can get vaccine. We do have a mpox vaccine, and we are urging communities to go to their nearest facilities. We can arrange that you get this mpox if you are meeting the criteria.
And the United Nations Drug and Crime Agency, the UNODC, says opium poppy production in Afghanistan has fallen significantly. Opium is the main ingredient for making heroin. The BBC's Bethany Bell has the details.
The UNODC said most Afghan farmers were continuing to stick to the ban on opium. The total area under opium poppy cultivation this year was just over 10,000 hectares, mostly in the northeast of the country. That's 20% lower than last year, and just a fraction of the levels recorded before the ban on opium in 2022, when over 200,000 hectares were cultivated. But the UNODC said that while opium was in decline, the trafficking and production of synthetic drugs such as methamphetamine was increasing.
And finally, the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah says it has a right to defend itself against Israeli attacks. In a statement, it has rejected the prospect of any political negotiations between Lebanon and Israel. The BBC's Hugo Bechanga reports.
The statement by Hezbollah comes as Israel has intensified its attacks on the group and indicated that it could escalate its offensive. It also comes days after the Lebanese president said there was no option other than to negotiate with Israel, as Lebanon is under American pressure to begin direct talks with the country. Israeli officials have stepped up their criticism of the Lebanese government, saying it has been slow in disarming Hezbollah. The group has so far refused to discuss its disarmament, saying Israel has not fully complied with the ceasefire deal.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
On to this story now. The third edition of the South African Future Trust Summit in partnership with Standard Bank concluded on Thursday following 2 days of networking, ideas and strategy sharing between entrepreneurs and innovators. Now, the summit has become one of the largest gathering for startups in South Africa. This event is hosted by the Oppenheimer Generation Foundation in partnership with Standard Bank. Tutongobe compiled this report.
The South African Future Trust Summit, SAFT, in partnership with Standard Bank, hosted by one of South Africa's successful business empire, the Oppenheimers, through the Oppenheimer Generations Foundation, took place at the Sandton Convention Center, north of Johannesburg in South Africa, from Wednesday and Thursday. The SAFT hopes to contribute to employment opportunities as the Southern African nation battles with the unemployment rate of 33.2%, the highest in the world. Chief economist at Standard Bank, Gulam Balim, delivered a keynote address looking at the economic outlook. Balim says there are sweeping changes that entrepreneurs should be aware of when doing business.
What I did speak about were some of the more sweeping changes enveloping the globe, where businesses, entrepreneurs, and just society needs to be aware of. The first sweeping trend that we spoke about was this idea that we entering epoch of multilateral contention. And by that what we mean is that there is likely to be a lengthy period of tension between global superpowers. We don't think, for example, the frictions between China and the US, or the US generally trying to recast the global order, is going to come to an end imminently. We think that the United States, for instance, is going to be, for a length of time, attempting to reassert its hegemonic status.
The summit continues to focus on accelerating growth and job creation in the small, medium, and micro enterprise SMME sector. The platform hopes to empower entrepreneurs and innovators with the tools that will ensure their businesses succeed through networking and idea sharing, among others. Now in its third year, the event hosts panel discussions and a pitch challenge that paves the path for successful businesses. The stages at the summit were divided into two sections. The founder and the Maverick stage, entrepreneur known as the Gen Z guy, Marco Stavro, took part in the Maverick stage, where he was part of the fireside chat discussing creative ways to get your brand seen. Stavro says the summit is a great platform to empower young people.
Well, I first heard about the South African Future Trust Summit through my investors called Man-Made Media, and they kind of were, the Oppenheimers approached South Africa and they're wanting to kind of create this entrepreneurial ecosystem and cultivate a sense of entrepreneurship in South Africa, because that's one of the ways that we're going to solve unemployment is through SME development and entrepreneurship. And so me being a young entrepreneur and me kind of having access to different universities and kind of youth communities, that we partnered up with them to drive growth specifically in that area. And I've been speaking with them and partnering with the last 3 years. And the big thing I think that the challenge we're trying to solve is that a lot of young people and people in general don't know about these events. They don't know where to go to get these events, and they don't have the resources, more than capital, but it's the network, the resources, and the information to start building.
Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Loop Mobility and Payments, entrepreneur Imtiaz Riley was part of the panel that spoke about the impact of technology transforming townships. Riley says his payment solution has transformed the minibus industry.
I come from a family of minibus taxi entrepreneurs. My grandfather was in the taxi industry for generations. My father was in the taxi industry for generations, and digital payments within that space has been something that people was dreaming of for years, but nobody's kind of been able to bring that to life. So we followed the design thinking approach, where we unpack the pains and gains of the current system. We're trying to cap it on the gains and trying to improve the pains. There's definitely a growing market for digital payments. I believe that digital payments can flourish should people get access, and that's what we're trying to do, giving people access to digital payments.
YouTube chef, author, and entrepreneur Firms was also part of a panel discussing the recipe for success.
No, I'm sitting on a panel, actually, with Chef Ruben Riffle and Jay Something, and we're going to be talking about our journey in social media as, in general. Sorry, our journey in food, with mine specifically in social media. And I kind of want to show people how did I use social media just to get people knowing more about it.
For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Beni in Johannesburg.
All right, let's go to Cape Town now. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says growing global inequality is deepening social divides and threatening stability. Ramaphosa was speaking at the International Women's Forum in Cape Town, a global gathering of women leaders from more than 30 countries. The president used his keynote address to warn that recent global challenges risk reversing decades of progress in women's empowerment. Now calling on delegates to push back against inequality and exclusion. Zara Groenewald reports.
The International Women's Forum brings together around 500 women from across the world. Among them, heads of state, CEOs, academics, and civil society leaders. It's a platform aimed at advancing women's leadership and promoting equality in decision-making. This year's cornerstone conference, held at the Cape Town International Convention Centre, is centered on the philosophy of Ubuntu, the idea that I am because we are. President Ramaphosa says the concept reflects the need for collective leadership and shared responsibility in tackling inequality and exclusion.
Between 2000 and 2024, 1% of the world's population captured 41% of all new wealth in the world, while just 1% new wealth went to the poorest half of humanity. It found that in more economically unequal societies, fewer women complete higher education or are even represented in bodies that make the laws that govern them.
Ramaphosa said the findings form part of a new G20 report released this week, warning of an inequality emergency that threatens economic stability and social progress. He called on world leaders to ensure that women are included in shaping global responses to these challenges. The president also cautioned that gains in gender equality risk being undone if complacency takes hold.
There is a danger that the advancements made with respect to women's empowerment, women's rights, and gender equality may be unraveled. Concepts of diversity, concepts of inclusion are now being challenged. Inclusion that also means that women must be included in everything that is done about them and for them.
With nearly 500 delegates from 30 countries, the forum is discussing the future of work, artificial intelligence, sustainability, and inclusive growth. Ramaphosa's message to the delegates and to the world was clear. Women's leadership is not optional, but essential in building a more equal and sustainable global future. Zara Groenewald, SABC News, Cape Town.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Leo tujadili kuhusu chipukizi wanaoimba nyimbo za wasanii wengine. Unadhani hili linatokana na nini, Omari?
Nadhani kweli kwamba tukizama muziki ya sasa, hasa wasanii ambao ni chipukizi, kwa kweli kwamba yani karibu kutoka muziki yao wenyewe, lakini wanakuwa wanapenda kuhubiria muziki ya zamani, hizo muziki ya wengine ambao ni taimbo.
Wengine wanadai kufanya hivyo ni kupromote vipaji vyao haraka ili waweze kujulikana. Je, yawezekana kukawa na ukweli wowote au ndio kukosa kabisa kipaji cha kuandika mistari?
Ndio, unaona kwamba msanii anapoazimia kwamba kuchukua wimbo mwingine wa msanii mwingine na kurudilia mara mbili sivyo, haionyeshi kwamba yani ndio wanaanza kazi ya muziki aizani, lakini ukiangalia kabisa asilimia kubwa utakuja kuona kwamba wanakosa ile mawazo ya kutunga muziki.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
As G20 leaders meeting gets closer, the well-being of people and the planet must be at the heart of the global economic agenda. That's according to South Africa's C20 Sherpa, Mabalani Mfundisi. Mfundisi was addressing the media in Pretoria, South Africa, on the progress made by a C20 working group ahead of the G20 summit scheduled for the 22nd to the 23rd of November. Take a listen.
The C20, which serves as the civil society engagement group within the G20 process under South Africa's presidency, has presented its initial policy draft and recommendations. Mabalani Mfundisi is the C20 Sherpa.
Read together with the 14 policy briefs and 2 statements of intent, which have been indicated here, this political declaration or communique outlines a blueprint for transformative, people-centered, and development rooted in justice, dignity, and planetary care. Civil society voices have insisted that 1. The future is political. 2. Justice delayed is justice denied. This political declaration is a mandate to reform global financial systems, to anchor climate action in justice, to democratize technology and data governance, to protect civic space, and to recognize that without reparative action, sustainability remains a fiction.
He also emphasized the need for debt restructuring.
So what are the C20 general recommendations? We have them packaged in 5 areas. The first area is on economic justice and financial reform, wherein we are talking about redesigning of the financial systems for justice and democratic legitimacy. Number 1 around this is to democratize global governance, reform International Monetary Fund and World Bank quota, and voting structures to reflect real economic contributions of the global south.
Mfundisi says prioritizing the well-being of people and the planet should be central in the global economic agenda.
We have said that the well-being of people and the health of the planet must be at the center of the global economic agenda. This requires infrastructure investment, community-led health pathways, education and energy initiatives. It rejects extractive models that concentrate wealth and erode local resources, harming communities, degrading ecosystems and further entrenching inequalities.
Meanwhile, South Africa's C20 chairperson Thulani Chifuta says over 300 civil society organizations have agreed that this year's G20 must be a people-driven summit.
Our biggest claim is that the work of C20 must not only end with the Leaders Summit, which we will be influencing, but the outcomes must show that the voice of civil society has been listened to.
As South Africa prepares to host world leaders later this month, the C20 says its message is clear. Global growth must be hand in hand with social justice and environmental sustainability. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Semosa in Pretoria.
Indeed, you are still listening to Channel Africa, the African perspective. This is Africa World Hour. As you might have heard, during the throw forward, we're supposed to speak to Hakima Muswabi, who is the lawyer to John Hache. As you'd know, that political climate in Tanzania continues to darken as the deputy leader of the country remains, being challenged in that particular region. So, but moving on, we do know that in a stinging assessment that adds to mounting regional concerns, the African Union Observer Mission has declared that Tanzania's recent general election failed to comply with democratic standards. Now, the AU's preliminary report point to systemic irregularities, including the disqualification of opposition candidates, intimidation of voters, restrictions on political campaigning, and the lack of transparency in vote counting. Now, the question remains, what is the AU going to do about this matter? To talk to us about this, we're now joined on the line by international political expert, Dr. Charles Senkala. Dr. Senkala, a very good evening to you and welcome to Channel Africa. To talk to us about this, we're now joined
thank you
on the
very
line
much.
by
Good evening and good evening to
expert,
Africa.
Dr. Charles
Yeah,
Senkala.
indeed,
Dr. Senkala, the African Union has once again, criticized an election this time in Tanzania for failing to meet democratic standards. But of course, beyond issuing statements, the AU really takes concrete actions. In your view, has the AU become a toothless observer rather than a true, generator of democracy?
First of all, I'd like to appreciate how robust the AU has come out, and as well as the SADC preliminary report in terms of the elections which were conducted in Tanzania on the 29th of October this year. For the first time, we can see that I think there's some reforms and transitioning in terms of sugarcoating the violent and unfair elections which has been conducted, especially when we look at the history of Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Uganda, and many other parts of the African continent where they always say they are free and fair. But I've looked at their preliminary report issued by the former president of Botswana, Mokgweetsi Masisi, who was the head of the mission there for the 72 observers who were there in that country from the 22nd to the 3rd of November to observe the missions. But if you look at the report, questions always comes in is before the elections are conducted, where was these elections observers? Where was the AU? Where was this the SADC region organization, including the United Nations Security Council, where nations such as Tanzania and many other nations pays a certain amount, to allow them to facilitate in what we call, probably, if we will achieve it as an African continent, free and fair elections. I can specifically address you to Article 41, subsection 7 of the Constitution of Tanzania, which prohibits the right to challenge presidential elections results, and as well as the Article 39, subsection 1 of the Constitution, which prohibits independent candidates. So these are embedded into the Constitution, and it becomes a problem and a challenge when the AU, they've already saw that issues such as this in the democratic dispensation, especially where Africa now is reforming to have a universal constitution, not really universal, but something similar to what we have here in South Africa, where elections can be challenged and many others. Some of these should have been prevented anyway.
So, as you talk about the clauses, do you believe that perhaps they need to be amended to really suit where the continent is going?
I think so. I think what has happened also to an extent is not something that has happened in the last 4 years of now President Hassan. It's the problems with the constitution. I think even when John Pombe Magufuli was elected in 2015, there were some protests, and a lot of opposition political parties went to an extent where they even went in exile. And they only had to return back after his death in 2021 when President Hassan took over office. And I think he sat down with them at the State House and they said they shall amend the constitution, to make sure that there's such clauses that I've mentioned can be repealed and include other clauses that can have the yardstick in terms of the elections. But changing the constitution in every country is not something that is simple. The changing of the constitution has to be done by parliament. Members of parliament has to bring up a bill, that shall be passed, and the president has to enact that. So the difficulties in the whole system of governance working together has put a challenge in terms of President Hassan to do those within that time. And unfortunately, like they say that if something is boiling, sooner or later it shall blow up. And it just had to blow up at the particular time where there was loss of lives.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, you're correct, because here in South Africa, I can attest to that. We're struggling with the amending Section 25 for land expropriation without compensation. But Dr. Sinkala, the AU's organization have been accused of speaking out too late and acting too little. And people can say, hang on, why does the AU wait until after the damage is done to issue a mild condemnation?
Yeah, it is quite unprofessional, if for the lack of a better term, because you can see that already, the actions leading to the elections, the executive in Tanzania has got absolute power. There it's not like the executive in South Africa, where committees of appointing judges, appointing the police or ministers goes through a committee and commission for the president to ratify that. But in Tanzania, it is a different ballgame, where the executive has got absolute power. And, like what happened to one of the main opposition leader, Tinubu, who was charged on charges of treason. Treason is very difficult to prove in court, and the processes are very cumbersome, and hence that has been the delay. And, issues such as that, if you look at the AU, where a lot of countries paid between 5% to close to 20, sometimes 30% of their GDP towards the AU mission to have it operational. And they pay another certain percentage to SADC regional blocks, depending on where the countries fall. And as well, overall, the 192 countries affiliated to the United Nations, they pay a certain percentage as well according to their GDP. And these are things that should have been prevented, to make sure, we can't look at her now, the President Hassan, and say, look, she has failed in the last 4 years. She was finishing the term of John Pombe Magufuli. But holistically looking, it is surprising that AU can come out and write that damning report that the elections were were not free and fair, knowing very well that before even the election date was announced some 4 years ago, they foresaw that these issues might not have a playing field. I always give an example to soccer and all these continental Olympic games, especially the World Cup that I watch so much. There are rules there and regulations which are fair. Even the losing team who accept the defeat, that things were better. But for elections, it's a different ballgame, especially where the constitution, which is supposed to protect the interest of both parties, it has, conundrums that gives an upper hand to the incumbent or whoever to eliminate the opposition or any other one who is opposing, in terms of the race. But what type of a competition of political ideologies or competition of elections where the opponent will be eliminated? You remain alone in the ring and declare yourself winning the elections at 98, 99%.
Yeah. And I wonder what happened to the peer review mechanism in amongst African leaders, because we saw some African heads of states attending the inaugural ceremony that was held at the military base, and I don't know why they chose that particular location, thus barring the Tanzanian people to supposedly come to see their supposed elected president. Now, should the AU, Dr. Singala, be critical of those who went there to endorse the elections?
Not really. Firstly, I'd like to touch on what you touched, that, the inauguration was held at the military base. I think the inauguration was held at the State House, at the house of the president. It was done that for security purposes. As you can see that the country was very fragile at the moment of just coming out from the elections. And the only way a country can start rebuilding and going back to normalcy is to, to confirm the president, from election transition to being the president of the country, so that the healing process can start. That question, involving the condemnation of heads of states or senior government officials from other organizations, or can also talk about my country, Zambia, because President HH attended that meeting and they made a very stunning statement in terms of the rule of law and many other issues that are affecting the nation. It's not going to endorse an elections. I think an election was conducted, whether or not the elections was free and fair, but the regional neighboring countries such as Zambia, which is particularly partly dependent on Tanzania in terms of the port. In fact, the last season which we had, the 2023-2024, we were engulfed with a very bad season in terms of droughts and everything. And I think there was an acquisition or attempted acquisition for 650 metric tons of maize. You know, part of it, I think 10 million tons was supplied, and thereafter was supplied thereafter. But historically, Tanzania, Zambia, all the southern part of the region, strategically, it's been a very good relations in terms of historically. In fact, Tanzania helped a lot of liberation movements to attain their independence, including South Africa. We can't forget Julius Kambarage Nyerere and my grandfather, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, who sacrificed their nations, to host the ANC freedom fighters and give them passports for those nations, for them to go to where the apartheid government never had friends. Talking about punishment from the AU or even the United Nations do not have that. The international law does not allow a country to punish another country or any other state organization such as the AU or the United Nations Security Council. As nations, according to the 1963-1962 Vienna Convention, regards that nations are on equal footing. So there wouldn't be any punishment. But we can see that other nations, especially South Africa, where we expected them to attend, there was no representation there, and maybe other nations as well. It's a silent sign of saying this is wrong and we cannot continue. Sugarcoating and embracing presidents, just like the way former President Thabo Mbeki was accused of quiet diplomacy when he, for the last 25 years or 20 years of Robert Gabriel Mugabe as elections and the instabilities, they kept on going there and hugging the ZANU PF instead of condemning whatever actions which was going there. I think the approach now in terms of elections and the way things are happening in politically in Africa, some other heads of states, they would like to stand because instabilities in other countries, actually it's an instability in another country because it affects the fiscus. Because of migration of people who are moving or fleeing from those neighboring countries and moving to where it is a little bit quieter.
Yeah. Dr. Zingale, just as a parting shot, the AU Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance commits member states to free and fair polls, yet there's no enforcement mechanism. And the question then is that a fatal flaw in the AU's design? Do you see this design that has many loopholes?
Yes, indeed. Indeed. You can't be just a policy organization without any consequences. Nations such as the United States of America, I think, was it last week or this week, when we had President Trump who warned Nigeria, in terms of the killing of Christians, that he shall engage his military to sort out Nigeria, which is unlawful in terms of diplomatic protocol. He shouldn't have said that. But it's because of the mechanism in terms of the systems that are there, that are just either policymakers or just conference makers or just, sending a note of condemning or accepting or celebrating There was amendments which was done, I think, after the Organization of African Unity was disbanded or renamed in the year 2000, that nations must ratify what they call an oversight, from the region organization and as well as the continental organizations, to have an oversight on the governance of countries. A few countries accepted that, but others, they said no, it would be an interference in terms of sovereignty, and others, which has left it to be the way it is, just to write reports. We were with the view that the formation of AU in 1963 would have now started from one country to another country until all the 55 odd countries have a constitution which is like the South African 1994 constitution, which was rewritten, from scratch, and they considered all other aspects, including elections, governance, local government, provincial government, and national government, and the international policies in terms of how they relate themselves to the world. But if you look at the Tanzanias, we are speaking to the constitution, which they look at is the 1977 constitution, which was an inheritance from the British government. And it becomes a challenge when you don't have an holistic constitution that protects the interest of citizens and gives a level playing field that is equal to everyone to participate in the competition of ideas, which is also known as elections.
Dr. Charles Sinkala, international political expert, thank you so much for indeed making the time.
A pleasure.
That conversation brings us to exactly 21:39 Central African Time. You're still listening to Channel Africa. This is Africa World Hour.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
All right, on to the story now. The South African government has launched an investigation into reports that some of its citizens have been recruited as mercenaries to fight in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, DECO, says it has received credible intelligence that South Africans have joined both sides of the war, a move that could violate the country's laws on foreign military involvement. Now, under South Africa's Foreign Military Assistance Act, it is illegal for citizens to enlist on or provide combat support for foreign forces without government authorization. Now, to unpack the seriousness of this, we talk now to Willem Els, a senior training coordinator on terrorist and explosive-related incidents at the Transnational Threats and International Crimes Program at Institute of Security Studies. But just to mention also that Channel Africa did reach out to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation for comment, but our attempt was indeed unsuccessful. But thank you so much for making the time and welcome to Channel Africa.
Good evening to you.
Yeah, so what do we know so far about South Africans being recruited to fight in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and how widespread is this phenomenon?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. It's still unfolding situation. We do not have all the information as yet. We know what we from the news reports, but also from the statement from the presidency and Durko that actually confirmed that they are looking into this. So that is basically what we know. What we know is that 17 of these people have been recruited to go and become mercenaries or to fight on either of the one sides. We really do not know at this stage. They say that in the Donbas region, are they on the Russian side or are they on the Ukrainian side? We do not know. So that makes it a bit complicated. But I think looking at that, you rightly mentioned, whatever side they're on, it is prohibited by our legislation, and also it is then criminalized if they go and do so.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Willem, that you're saying we do not know at this point in time. But perhaps let me put you on the spot. Are these individuals joining formal military units, or are they being absorbed into private military networks or similar entities?
Well, it depends on which side they are, because the two different sides are both recruiting. This war has been going on for quite some time, and we see that per month, we see that in the thousands of people are killed, of soldiers or fighters are killed on both sides. So they are running short of people. We saw on the Russian side, for instance, that they even went to the prisons and they actually commuted the sentences of some of these criminals in order to go and fight on the border with Ukraine, against Ukraine. And they also recruited people from for instance, they recruited North Koreans. There were some Chinese people. There was even one guy from Zambia that was recruited, and he got killed. And we also saw that that in countries like Kenya have lost some people, but also we saw that Cameroon has lost some people. So it seems that this is widespread in how they are recruiting these people. Some of them with what we can understand with lucrative contracts, and maybe when they get there, it is not what it is supposed to be. It's not what they were promised, and that is what we anticipate happened in this situation. So what we see with this tactics of especially on the Russian side is that what they do is they normally get these people that are inexperienced, and then they submit them to a few days of training, and they send them to the front, and then they are just unleashing them on the Ukrainian forces, which of course they call it the meat grinding process, where they just keep on throwing bodies towards the opposite side, and then trying to exhaust them and to push them back. So if that is the case on the Russian side, then of course that is that spells problems for these people, and maybe also one of the reasons why they reached out to be rescued.
Yeah, and Velleman, I'm keen to know from you what makes South Africans particularly attractive to them. Is it because of desperation from locals here, or are they skilled in any way? And how do such recruitment, networks typically operate?
Yeah, if you look at the situation in South Africa, of course, we've got an unemployment rate that is unacceptably high. There's no prospect for some of our young people. We see that the people that have been recruited, they estimate that is between 20 and more or less 40 years old. And when this legislation was promulgated, it was actually prompted after 1994, when you had a lot of soldiers, former soldiers and police officers that were battle hardened. They fought in Angola, fought in Namibia, and they were offered very lucrative contracts to go and fight as mercenaries in countries like Liberia, especially by back then the company Executive Outcomes. So that is what happened back then, and these people were really recruited for their skills. But if we look at the people that are now the ages of these people, it's hard to believe that they got any or very little experience on the military field. So that is what makes it so worrying for us, that these people might have been recruited as cannon fodder for if, especially on the Russian side, if they are there. So that is the challenge that we have, and these people are being recruited. Just a while ago, there was this influencer that was actually exposed for recruiting females to go and work in a drone factory in Russia, and also we saw there are currently a lot of South Africans that and or other Africans for that matter, from Namibia, from Kenya, and so on, who are in Myanmar. Where they have been recruited towards Thailand with lucrative job offers and promises of good work. And when they got there, they were trafficked across the border and they were forced to commit crimes online. So it seems that there's a pattern where the young people of South Africa are being targeted with lucrative contracts abroad. And this one is just on the military side, and it's more deadly than the others.
Yeah, and as I've indicated in my intro, Willem, that South Africa's Foreign Military Assistance Act clearly prohibits this kind of, activity. In practice, how difficult is it for the South African government to basically monitor and enforce these laws? Is it because of, the budget constraints, or is just pure incompetence in your view?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a combination of all of them. Our intelligence fraternity is under severe pressure at the moment. They are in process of revamping our legislation with the GLAP Act, and because of the outcomes and the recommendations on the Zondo and also the Mufamadi report. So our intelligence is not what it's supposed to be, and they are struggling to keep a tab on this. And we saw that, for instance, with the 95 Libyans that were actually trained here in South Africa at one of the camps in Mpumalanga. That just demonstrates to us that our intelligence is not what it is supposed to be, and that actually places a big burden on the authorities. If you don't work with credible intelligence as a decision maker, you're actually working blind, and you have to make blind decisions, and you can also not work proactively. So that is the challenge that we are facing, that they are facing. And in terms of the repercussions, you mentioned the legislation. The legislation actually it criminalizes the act, but also when it comes to the penalties, you can get some prison sentence or a fine, or you can just get a fine. So what will happen typically with these people, should they be rescued and coming back to South Africa, if they're still alive, because we don't know what's going to happen in the meantime. As I mentioned, it's quite volatile and quite dangerous where they are at the moment. So when they come back, they will be investigated, and then that docket will then go to the National Prosecution Authority, that will then decide whether they've got a prima facie case to prosecute them. And then normally what happened in the past, because this act is going back almost 20 years now, in the past, when people returned, they were charged, and then they typically went to the prosecution for a plea bargain, and all of the people that were actually charged in the past, they got off with a fine because of a plea bargain.
Yeah, Willem, just before I let you go, I mean, how difficult would it be for South Africa to bring them back? I mean, we just had a challenge of bringing bodies from DRC. Now we're talking about Ukraine and Russia. How difficult will that process be for the government of South Africa?
Yeah, it's a difficult process because it's a lot of diplomatic hoops that you have to jump through. We saw in the past, there were also some people that went to fight in Syria with ISIS, and we saw in recent past they brought back some 14 people not too long ago, and previously they brought back just over 100 people. So it is a long process. It's a diplomatic process, but fortunately South Africa has got, if they are on the Russian side and they engage with them, South Africa, part of BRICS, they've got a very good relationship on a diplomatic level with Russia in order to bring them back. Ukraine also, we saw the visit the other day, and we see that there's also some strong relationships. So it should not be very difficult, but it will be costly. And the problem is that you've got your foreign missions, your embassies in all these countries to look after South Africa's interest in the first, but also to assist your South African citizens that are in distress in those countries. So they've got protocols in place, and they've also got some measures in place in order to do so. But it is diplomatic, and it will take some time, but it is not impossible.
Yeah, and last one, could this investigations strain relations with Russia or Western allies? I mean, already we have challenges with the United States. I mean, could this deepen on what the findings reveal?
Of course, there's always a possibility. It just depends how it's going to play out. America and our Western allies are really sensitive about our relationship with Russia because of the dynamics. But us being part of BRICS, also, South Africa claiming that they are neutral and they're not biased in this whole situation. It all depends how they play that out and how they manage to convince the others on that. But as I mentioned, it's not just South Africa that has been targeted. Other African countries are also being targeted by these things, and I don't think that will be a major issue if it was not sanctioned by the South African government.
All right, Willem Els, thank you so much for indeed making the time.
You're welcome.
All right, there you have it. That conversation brings us to exactly 21:53 Central African Time. You're listening to Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Now, a harmonized and rights-based legal framework that seeks to advance labor migration governance across Africa has moved another step closer to implementation. Now, parliamentarians, regional bodies, and social partners from across Africa are debating on the model law on labor migration in Africa at the 6th Ordinary Session of the 6th Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa, in an effort to, of course, refine the framework designed to improve access to social protection and across the continent. Ndandla Mahlangu reports.
The Model Law on Labour Migration is a legislative framework developed by the Pan-African Parliament to help African Union member states create or revise their national laws to better protect the rights of migrant workers. It is designed to harmonise national legislation with international labour standards, ensuring fair recruitment, protection of rights, and access to social protection for migrant workers across Africa. The draft is being refined through consultations with various stakeholders and is expected to be finalized and adopted by the Pan-African Parliament. PEP Committee on Trade, Customs and Immigration Matters Chair John Bideri says labor migration is a powerful driver of regional integration and development, but only when governed in a way that protects dignity, rights and opportunity.
Labor migration is a defining feature of Africa integration and socio-economic transformation. Every year, millions of Africans move in search of employment and decent livelihoods. However, national laws governing recruitment, social protection, and mobility remain fragmented. Migrant workers often experience discrimination, unsafe conditions, and weak access to justice. The deplorable and worrying situation of migrants, including migrant workers, in many host countries who are reported to face violations of labor and other rights of migrant workers, xenophobia attacks on migrants, and arbitrary expulsions highlight the challenges to achieving decent work, equal treatment, and the protection of human rights, including labor rights.
Alexio Musindo, Director for the Decent Work Team for Eastern and Southern Africa at the International Labour Organization, has commended the Pan-African Parliament for its commitment to support the adoption of the model law on labour migration.
Allow me to commend the Pan-African Parliament for its leadership and vision in advancing this crucial framework. The achievements reflect not only the Parliament's dedication to workers' rights and social justice, but also its determination to translate continental aspirations into practical instruments that improve people's lives. Labour migration, when governed effectively, can be a powerful driver for inclusive growth, regional integration, and sustainable development across the continent.
Professor Marius Oliver from the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa says the model law will enhance labour migration and governance across the continent.
This model law is meant to serve as a legal tool and as a guiding framework for AU member states in managing international labour migration in an effective, harmonized and coordinated manner. Of course, this law has to be domesticated in whatever form the countries would like to have it adopted. The model law combines human rights, but also inclusive of fundamental labour rights and developmental and gender-based approaches. It supports concrete action by ILO constituents, Pan-African Parliament and other stakeholders on the promotion and implementation of AU, REX, and international legal instruments and policy frameworks, including but not limited to ILO international labour standards.
The draft model law on labour migration in Africa is currently being debated at the PEP plenary for consideration and adoption. It will subsequently be recommended to the AU policy organs, and it is anticipated to undergo extensive advocacy for domestication by AU member states. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Kandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Ready to connect, innovate, and be inspired? It's all happening at Africa's Tech Festival, where Africa's technology meets the world. From the 10th to the 13th of November in Cape Town, join global leaders, investors, and innovators driving the future of Africa's digital economy. Don't miss the continent's biggest week in tech. Get your pass now at africatechfestival.com.
All right, that's a wrap on tonight's installment of Africa World Hour. From myself, Innocent Semosa, producer Dumelo Zulu, and technical producer Catherine, and the rest of the Africa World Hour team, thank you for listening. For comments on the show, send us an email at info@channelafrica.org. Good night.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired.